Next. Okay, so I don't know if you've noticed, we've now even got, it's a little bit confusing for someone with an airline background. You keep seeing this acronym CX, which to me was for many years Cathay Pacific and still is, and now it's customer experience. And suddenly it's everywhere. Like if you're on LinkedIn and you've got the connections that I have, suddenly every other thing in my LinkedIn feed is about customer experience. And a couple of times today, I'm going to touch on this idea again of confluence of trends. So we talk about all of these trends and we talk about the mega trends, but quite often it's very hard to tease them apart. So why is it that we've suddenly all gone crazy about talking about customer experience? Well, firstly, we probably always should have done. But I think the first thing that we need to think about is increasingly we live in, it's actually, this dates back to, Tammy, 1993, the first Harvard Business Review article on the experience economy. Yeah. We live in the experience economy now. We increasingly value, and again, it's that hierarchy of needs, we increasingly value emotions, moments, experiences over stuff. So that's really important. So, and this is a little chart that you can come in and see. This is from some work looking at that Amadeus did. With Oxford Economics, and they looked at tracking what spending is on stuff, which is the green, versus experiential, which is the red. And I think you'll notice that even people who are selling stuff are now selling experiences. So, you know, if you look at all the sports manufacturers, you've now got concept stores where you can go in and you can, you know, kick a football while being in your team's colours and stuff like that, because they now know that what they're selling is no longer trainers or football boots. They're selling that moment where you believe you are actually kicking the goal for your country. So we live in that experience economy. At the same time, that technology that we've been talking about today has empowered us and connected us a lot more. So we're always on, we're connected through, we can have that ability to interact with brands at more and more and more points. I thought about putting in there all the generational change that sits behind it, but again, it's pretty hard to disentangle it, because part of the reason millennials are the way they are, and centennials, the group behind them, are, and those of us who are perennials, in Holly's new word that I'm going to flog to death now, is that how much of that is we change and how much of that is technology. So if you look at people now, the iPhone is 10 years old. So literally anyone who's kind of 18, anyone who's through 18 to 25, they pretty much always grew up with a smartphone. It's not even that they grew up with a mobile phone, which is the upper end of the millennial cohort. They grew up with a smartphone, so they literally have no idea. We were joking about the fax machine, but I remember it was as little as 10 years ago, we had a client, and Telstra had pulled the internet on most of New South Wales. Gotta love that when you're running an international business, and we had to get something to a client. And I said, get it out. Came back, my millennial staff, and I'm going, did you go? And they said, oh, well, the internet's still down. So literally, to them, the message and the medium were the same thing. I'm going, you see that funny machine in a corner? You know, you stick it on there, and the client who sat, you know, half a world away in Dubai, they don't know our internet's down, they don't care our internet's down, just stick something through there and it will get to them. So, but literally to them, they could not imagine a world where if there is no internet, you're not really there. So it's empowered us and connected us in that way. So we're now thinking about those experiences, so you bring those two things together. And the other side of that is, through this, we are generating a mass of information. As I said, honestly, Google knows more about me than Andy, my life partner, does. Because I put things into Google that I don't actually tell him about. And believe us, most people do. And if anyone was on our webinar last week, we all saw that with YouTube. So somebody was presenting something. And I was sitting there going, what does it say about me? There's a lot of Game of Thrones and cat videos. So big data has enabled people on the other side of that to understand and tailor and know us and connect with us. And whereas at one point, you know, if you were a hotel or an airline, you pretty much didn't have any connection with the customer till they fetched up at your check-in desk or whatever, if you were lucky. Now we have that points of connection much, much earlier, and we have more tailored things. So as a result of this, our expectations have changed, and our expectations of the relationships that we have with businesses in our sector has changed. You know, it's still tougher for us than for other sectors. We're still all struggling to own the customer journey, but who owns the customer journey wins, basically. So now, just for a change rather than show our path to purchase, I thought I'd borrow Amadeus's. So now what we're finding is customers expect us to be, from the moment they first make that connection with us, they expect us to be there and in a relationship with them all the way across that customer journey. From that moment when we're sitting there going, where shall I go? I still prefer dreaming to inspiration, because I think inspiration is what we do, dreaming is what the customer does. You know, through to the idea of going out and doing it, through to the stage where, you know, we're getting ready to go. All of these stages now, because the customer knows we can do it, this is one of those rare occasions. Quite often Bronwyn and I will say, just because you can doesn't mean you should. Now the customers think because we can understand them, we should understand them. So our expectation, it's a global economy now, it's experience, we want it to be smooth, we want to be there, we want to have that relationship across. So I think that that's now the expectation of what's going to happen, because I now have a direct line to you through that funny little piece of metal and, you know, a few bits of radio waves. And we need to be able to think about this and break it down into multiple levels, because what we need to understand is the ecosystem that we're operating in that customer experience. So what is the context in which people are doing it? Bron talks about micro moments. You know, I could be searching for my holiday while I'm waiting for a coffee. In Sydney, we are sadly probably looking and searching while we're stuck at traffic lights or in traffic, but in China we're sat on a bus. We want to be gaining that information. That suddenly that time feels empty if we're not connected. Anyone ever been at a conference where someone tries to get you to hand your mobile phone to someone you don't know? It's a pretty scary feeling. So we need to be understanding that context and the system and the constraints that we operate under. Then we need to be thinking across that customer journey that we just saw. So breaking down the silos, which can exist in organizations, particularly larger organizations. You know, there's, so we did some work last year with high-end event planners, luxury end of event planners as part of our luxury travel research. And we sat there and they said, you know, there's this big problem. And I go to somebody and I say, okay, do you want to tender for holding a group of 20 CEOs from our global organization? Let's say we're Siemens or somebody like that. And the marketing team, the sales team do this shit-hot proposal. And I say yes, and then I get handed to someone else and I have to explain everything all over again. And I'm giving you thousands of dollars. So customers don't really care about our silos. They don't care about our internal structures. It's like I did a trip where I had bill shock before my mobile phone provider did the $5 a day global roaming. And I was traveling and I topped it up, but it kept getting cut off. And I would phone them and they'd say, oh yeah, we'll reinstate it. And they'd reinstate it, then they'd cut it off. And I'd ring them and they'd go, oh, that department didn't have permission. And I'm like, I don't actually have a relationship with the marketing department. I don't have a relationship with the customer service department or the bill shop department. I have a relationship with you as a business. So we need to be thinking about that and owning that relationship across there. But within that, we then need to go away and say, what are the needs, those needs? What are those friction points? And we need to meet one, the needs, and eliminate the other, the friction points. So what is it that's there? Because nowadays what happens when people hit friction points, we've always lost customers, but now it's easier for customers to go somewhere else. I remember very early on when Google were doing their algorithms, there's a wonderful thing where you saw a search pattern of someone who was searching Goa, 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 Goa. Kenya is where they booked, because they hit a roadblock. And in a world where you can choose between Goa and Kenya and Australia, hitting roadblocks, really, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to make it hard for people to give you money? So customer experience at every stage, because now every part of that journey is the experience you're selling. So when we talk to people, particularly when we talk to small operators who really don't think they like marketing, I often say you need to think about marketing as being your pre-experience, the first part of experience. Because now what you are beforehand is as much who you are as what happens when people turn up at your wonderful vineyard or do your amazing food tour or whatever. That you really, really need to do that. And Bron and I actually had an interesting example of creating friction and not seeing that side. So we were trying to get some stuff printed for this. Our printer was on holiday. So he did the right thing. He said, okay, here's someone I really trust who's going to look after you really well. Passed it over to him. And then we kind of decided last minute we'd like these little notepads. So we rang the printer and said, can you do this? And he said, oh, I'm not allowed to do that now. They've told me, I'm not to take on any more of your business. They want to pass it around to other people. I'm like, why would you do that? And we said to the guy, look, we're ordering you to do this. We're not going to do it with anyone else. You're not depriving anyone else of the revenue. So Bronze had been stalked by our normal printer.
Yes, I was. It was bizarre.
To do that. So why would you create those friction points in the relationship? Why would you make it hard for people to do that? And often we do things like we put terms and conditions in there, or, you can't book it instantly. You know what? If you can't book it instantly, I don't want to book with you. I haven't got time, particularly those millennial business travelers. That's really, so meeting those friction points and looking at those touch points. So you need to kind of do all the way up and all the way down in terms of thinking about what is that customer experience journey. Where am I interacting with you? How am I interacting with you? Where are the silos? Where are the points where I lose people when I move them, like those event planners from the sales team through to the delivery team? That should feel effortless. Ideally, why do I have to deal with a different person? Why don't I have an account manager who's like, okay, those two guys will prepare the bid, I'll do that. Maybe that's not possible, maybe that's too idealistic, but thinking about that, thinking about all those friction points. Like, really, if someone's bringing you, 20 CEOs who might come back and visit with you, you want to make it hard and make them re-explain to you what the dietary preferences of the CEO from Germany is. Why would you want to do that? And now I've broken this down into a few bits because, again, I think some of the stuff Amadeus has done with this is thinking about what that means and what that need state is. Different parts of it will be at different stages of the journey, but I quite like this. So they've talked about 5 or 6 different stages of what they've called the journey of me, and this is some research for Asia Pacific, and it's all in there. So it's know me, what I want before I want it. When we did the luxury travel research, particularly people who are paying that kind of money, we talked about the idea of ESSP. Extra sensory service perception. If you're paying a lot of money, you don't want to have to tell people. You expect people to know what that should look like. And people will share information with you if they see it's a benefit. We've changed our views on the idea of, I don't want you to know anything about me. I'll let you know things if you use your powers for good. I think, to me, if I think of one takeaway from today, it's use your powers for good. Inspire me. Travel's about inspiration. So, use technology to do that. How well do we use our technology? As Bronze says, it doesn't always have to be the most beautifully produced video, but using that in-the-moment video, in-the-moment techniques to do this. New technology people want the most, this is Asia after all, augmented reality apps that deliver digital overlays. This is the power of what we're doing in the customer experience space now, that we can put over the top of that, not just here's where your apartment is, and by the way, here's a link to the address of the best coffee, but here's on a map, here's on my image of my property, where's the sign, turn that way for the best coffee. So that really we're making it very, very simple and interactive for people. Connect me. We talked about Wi-Fi earlier. So, I want to stay in touch with people. I want to be bragging about where I am. I want to be doing that. I want to be out there posting in Facebook and TripAdvisor, and I want to be on things like WeChat if I'm Chinese, and increasingly across Asia. WeChat is growing in India. It's growing across Southeast Asia. And instant messaging apps are just growing and growing and growing. So definitely do that. Talk to me again on my terms. We're no longer in shouting at each other. We've moved beyond that, or marketing to segments. We're in the world of the one-on-one. My relationship, I don't care about all your other customers. I don't care what they want. I just care about me and my experience. And how do I want to do it? So, as Bronze said, emails for many markets are still there. WeChat, social media. Talk to me in the channels where I want to talk to me. So don't kind of force fit me. Now, this is hard for small businesses because, again, you don't want to be servicing multiple channels. So it's, again, about the point about your personas. Where are your personas? That's where you need to be. Pick the 2 or 3 most important ones and interact there. Really, really important. Delight me. Magic of travel. That's why we're doing it. That's why we live it. And even business travelers, they might say it's all about the practicalities, but some of the best experiences in my life have been business travel experiences. And I'm sure many of you in this room, as we're all frequent travelers, will do the same. So, that's where the sharing economy has done so well, because they've brought spontaneity and magic and authenticity back into the experiences. And that's where really we want to be doing that. 1 in 7 travellers has said no one's ever exceeded their expectations, partly because our expectations are going like this. I remember years ago I did some work and we were tracking satisfaction with airline stuff, and I thought, I was always brought in to do the fun stuff after the, how many RPKs have people flown on airlines this year. The research team was brought in. And I did this, okay, let's have a look at satisfaction with food, because airlines had been investing millions in upgrading their food, and objectively, their food had got better. The problem was our appetite for good food and our perception of what constituted good food, the expectation had risen faster. So we saw expenditure going like this, satisfaction going like this, because expectation had gone like that. And it's the gap that matters. The gap between what the customer expects and what you're delivering is what matters. It's actually also the gap between what happens. Quite often revolutions happen when things are starting to get better, because customers, the people expect things to get better faster than we can ever deliver it. Care for me, keep me safe and secure. That's a really important thing right now. It's not always possible, but some people would be deterred, other people will be there. Apparently, there was a rush of Australians after 9/11 who said, can I come, will you give me a cheap flight to come to America, because no one else is going to be coming. So some people will want to take advantage of that and go. Paris, that's what they did after the terrorist attacks. Paris did a campaign where they didn't talk about terrorism at all, but they talked about, this is what Paris is about, come back when you're ready. Because they knew some people would go, I'm not going to wait, I love Paris so much, I'll just come back despite the security. But they knew other people would they just needed to keep reminding people, so when the moment came, they'd feel safe to come back. They never said it was safe, they can't say that, none of us can say that anymore. But it was there. So looking forward for that. And who's got permission to tell people? One of the things I remember when I worked with TA many years ago on the first Australia.cn site, one of the things we found out is no one's looking at anything interesting on your site until they know they can get a visa to come see you. So one of the things we talked about was very, very prominently tell people this is what the visa arrangements is, or flag where you can go and get the visa things. So, talk to that and use other assets around you to develop that. So what we thought we might do is show you how we've updated our path to purchase with one specific sector, which is cruise. And I'm going to ask Tammy Marshall from the Beehive, who's one of our partners, to come and talk to me about this. Because what we did was we took all of the research that we've done over the years on path to purchase, and we sat there and we brainstormed between us. So Tammy was my client initially at A80 Kings. We then took it into Inspiring Journeys, and then she went to Carnival, and we did that. And then when she came out and worked as a consultant, we were like, we have to partner with you because we know that we work well together. So what we did was we sat down and created this. And this is an exercise that you can do for yourselves, is to sit and use all of the information you have about customers and partner. So I'm just going to flash those. Oh, this is not the right version, Bron. I checked that it was there this morning. It's been overwritten. This is not the right version. The map's not there. Hold on.
It should be an email or something.
No, I think it's got overwritten somehow, because when I checked it was...
Do we have any cruises in the room?
There you go, customer experience mapping. Is that it? There's 3 versions in there, mate.
Yeah.
No, who's cruise?
I've cruised.
Yeah. Oh, we got
I have, yeah.
That's it. There we go.
It's very unique. So who's passionate cruiser? Yeah, it's good. It's been a remarkable story, I think, in Australia with the growth of cruise. So, do you want me to talk a little bit about this?
Yeah, I would. I'm handing over
the
to you.
moment while you were.
Yeah, no, great. That's why we did it, really.
So Carol and I did the brainstorming and looked at the customer journey for cruising, and then we looked at the friction points. And it's kind of an interesting sector, cruising, because it's very integrated. If you think about going on a holiday, you kind of separate the airport from the holiday, but in cruising, so much of it is actually dependent, and to get that seamlessness of the experience, everything.
Yeah.
I think the friction points, what can go wrong, is much higher. And in Australia, we have a lot of challenges around infrastructure. So it's not necessarily as seamless as it could be in Miami, where they've built new terminals, they can embark and disembark passengers in 10 minutes. So, you know, in Australia, you've still got a little blue coupon waiting for the blues to come up to actually get off the ship. So, because we don't have enough planks and, you know, ability to offload people quickly because of the lack of investment so far. So I guess the interesting part, I think we sat down and went through, I was starting to think about my holiday. This writing's a bit too small to see what's really going on. Start researching. Really interesting part about the cruise lines around the booking process that has been very successful. Just to give you an example is, usually you book your holiday to go on a cruise holiday, and one of the brands, Holland America, what they do is, I've booked my cruise holiday and then I'm going to come and actually, I've got a second contact centre who's then going to come back and then try and sell you the shore excursions, the restaurants, the massages, the onboard experience. And they have a second contact centre that then does those bookings. And what happens is the more you commit up front, then the more you spend on your holiday later. Because you've already thought, oh, that's all paid and done for. So what they saw by introducing the second contact centre and then selling more of the experiences and getting commitment up front is the spend per customer went up. So it's a very good strategy.
My guess is that that would be true for actually almost any kind of trip, but most people don't bother. Yeah.
It's actually a very smart strategy. The anticipating part is a really important part for cruise, and I think the cruise lines do that really well. They do the countdown, number of days, and then they start seeing all the different information, getting excited about the shows and if it's a good cruise line, they'll be starting to get you excited in the anticipating part and thinking about those massages and the type of food that you can have.
Do you want to buy a wine pack?
Yeah, so
I did that right at the beginning. The wine pack.
The wine pack. Anyway, so that's we go through that, but I think it was probably more interesting is when once you map the customer journey, the really important part is to understand what the pain points are, and that's when you're talking to your customers. Cruise critics are a really excellent one to look at what people are really saying. Often your voice of customer, you're talking about getting your voice of customer reports and mapping this into the friction map, because this is where you want to try and focus a lot of the attention. And there is quite a lot of things that can go wrong on the cruise. So people really worry about where I park at the port. You know, they need a lot more information about how to get to the port, how far is it from the railway station, if they've taken a train. So there's a lot more. Everyone understands where the airport is, but they don't necessarily understand where the ports are. They're often sometimes buried in industrial areas in the back end of somewhere, so requires more information. There's also, once they start embarking, you've got to arrive at a certain time. There's a whole lot of systems behind the arrival. And if you get there too early, you might have to sit there for 3 hours. And the infrastructure could be, it wasn't Barangaroo, it was a tent there for a long time, until White Bay was built.
Try doing that when it's 32 degrees and 100% humidity and you're 65 and overweight, you know.
Yeah. Well, often the cruise lines will arrive at a grain terminal somewhere because they can't get into a port or there's not enough port. So all kinds of things happen. Then there's the on-board experience, which the cruise lines do very well. The destination ports of call, we have 42 ports in Australia, for instance, but very few of them cruise lines will come alongside. So then you do a tendering process. And that tendering process is a pretty subpar experience. But if it's short, then people will deal with it. But if it's going to be long and I've got to wait in the queue and then I'm on a remote island, I want to go back, but I've got to wait for the next tender and there's 100 people in front of me, it's not a very nice experience. So all these things, I think the destination, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to really improve that experience. And then there's the disembarkation. You know, have you got enough taxis at the end? Often a big problem. They're all coming off the ships and there's not enough taxis there. Buses. Some of the cruise critic stuff I saw recently on cruise was, you know, I've arrived in a little port called Eden and we're being bussed around. Beautiful little port, but we're being put on a bus that there's no air conditioning, just being shown around. We get shown all the things that we won't have time to spend doing. And, you know, really frustrated. And I think cruise is one of those sectors that hasn't moved past in the destination side to still in that mass tourism movement. It hasn't got to the personalisation, and that's infrastructure again. It doesn't have enough buses and it doesn't have enough guides. And for the volume, the sheer volume that just
Yes.
arrives in the destination, and they haven't kind of taken it to the sharing economy yet, which is another way of maybe
And
solving it.
that's something that we saw, wasn't it? Was very much doing that. And the other thing was WA did some research a few years ago under the Tourism Research Australia hat, where they looked at what the barriers were in, I think it was Busselton. And one of the things was the cruise ship gets in at 7 in the morning. If you want to walk off there and do something, there is no coffee shop within walking distance that opens before 9 o'clock in the morning. So basically by that point, people have either elected to go on a tour or they're thoroughly pissed off with you.
Yeah.
And they've moved into town, so if you're close to that cruise port, you've lost that business. And to me, it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't you open at 7 and then close at 10 for a couple of hours? And they literally worked out that something like, I think it was 30% of the revenue opportunity was lost because of that.
Yeah.
For us,
Simple
you know,
thing,
the
yeah.
small retail shops, the coffee shops, all of those businesses that really feed the money through a destination, it was quite stunning, isn't it?
Yeah. So I think the cruise has still got a long way to go in terms of that, the whole personalisation and the experience side on destination. One of the destinations that does it really well is Napier in New Zealand. They actually, the whole town gets dressed up and actually gets into the theatre to welcome the cruise lines and actually play a part. So it's really cool. But that's, you know, so that's kind of an area that a lot of the STOs are very focused on to try and improve that experience. And some of them, Western Australia's doing a really good job of that, with a lot of training programs and guiding programs, education around that. So anyway, that's kind of, the friction map's a really important one because I think that's how you improve and actually get more repeat cruises and get
Advocacy.
cruises
Yeah.
and good advocacy. And I think we just did a consumer survey with MyTravelResearch around intention to cruise and a bit about the destination itself. And you know, the intention to cruise over the next couple of years is still growing in double-digit growth. So more people want to cruise, but the ports and the destination rated, you know, second behind the cruise lines and being, you know, the most important thing about their choice and what influences their decision. So again, it comes back to this can have a big impact on the cruise lines business if we don't get the destination part right on the demand side.
And I think also one of the things we saw was things like those tender ports really mattering to certain audiences, and not necessarily the audiences we expected, was it, Tammy? So we, younger people, because they're not patient. They don't want to sit there and wait for hours for a tender, and quite often they'll be doing more independent stuff.
Yeah.
So
and on a bad weather day, you know, if you've got a bit of mobility issues or older demographic, they may not want to actually get on a tender. So Morton Island's done it very well. They've actually brought in a few cats to offload people really quickly, and they can take 200 or 300 people at a time, as well as having the tendering going. But there's so many of those things that really impact the whole cruise holiday.
And I recently came across some research from the US on repeat visitation, as you said, driving that. So there's the cruise one, but there's how are you using cruise to get people to come to your destination. And that shore experience, the quality of the shore experience matters much more for repeat visitation for cruise than it does for non-cruise visitors. Because non-cruise visitors tend to be there a bit longer. So they've got more time to get to know you and forgive you for small things. If you've got an incredibly small time in port, every moment is amplified. So that's why, this is why you're working with ACA, isn't it, Tammy, to try and get the destinations and cruise lines working better together, because actually everybody wins if we do that. You know, often it's seen as a competition. It actually, if you want it to work for you, it's not a competition. And if you don't want to be in cruise, that's fine. But if you think cruise is a good way to get people to your destination, and actually for many remote areas of Australia, it remains, you know, people would rather sit on a cruise line than drive 6, 8, 10 hours these days. So if you want to do it, it really is about getting that.
Yeah,
so.
to me it requires collaboration because there are so many stakeholders to make this happen in terms of delivering that seamless holiday experience. And so having the ports and the destinations and then all the shipping services and all the logistics that fall underneath that, that has to work all seamlessly to make it brilliant for the customer. And you can see it easily. When it goes right, it's fantastic, and when it goes wrong, it's
We had, Sam and I had a wonderful
point that the cruise lines need to communicate a bit more around the complexities, because it's often the call will be also that they may not be able to get it back on the ship later, depending on what the weather's, if the weather's building, right? So, but they don't communicate very well.
Well, we ended up doing it. I did a lot of research and spoke to Steve Wilson and spoke to Holland America, and it really was the captain's decision. This was too long. But as
So
a
he
result,
wasn't to do with weather or anything, he just said, I'm not stopping.
he just said, I'm not
Well,
sorry.
that's
Unless
weird,
you can
yeah.
basically guarantee
That's weird.
that you're going to have people helping our staff go through, because we've got a very tight channel. With tendering, we're not stopping there, even though they want pilot, they wanted pilots, and
right.
it was like, but you're arriving there. So, but in January this year, the world come back, that is a great, perfect, good tip ship. But because of the experience that we had no buy-in from that at all, and Lissanne and I actually had to, with my husband, we were the welcoming committee. We had to make it so seamless for all those passengers to be made to feel welcome, because our chamber didn't even want to get involved.
And you know, the
So
cruise passengers
it's
really
not
rate that.
holistic. It's not just about us wanting to be participating
Yes.
in the industry. When you're talking cruise as a cruise destination, you've got to have everybody.
Yeah, that sense of arrival when you arrive into port and then they're offloading and
And
they
they didn't know
that welcome
because
is
we
important.
pulled it off really well.
Yeah.
Paul is standing there with a burnt up to a crisp. I was right, I was on the ship. saying welcome.
And we saw that in the survey, you know,
Yep.
customers feel really strong, cruisers feel really strongly about that welcome.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
They, Sam and my husband did a brilliant job. Brilliant. And even
Well done.
people came down going, oh, we didn't know there was a cruise ship. Oh, yeah, look, of course, we told you all about it. Blah, 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 blah.
Cruise has got the other just that they've got off the coast of Wollongong, but now don't want to become a cruise destination, or they got the Illawarra Retirement Trust,
That was
retirees,
fantastic.
and they put an ambassador program together,
Yeah.
and they got hundreds and hundreds of retirees that meet and greet, and
They did a
Chamber of
great
Commerce
job.
behind.
Yeah, no, that's excellent.
Yeah.
And
It
that
really
helps.
is about your community.
Yeah. Yeah.
All in all.
And it helps people because that's in a sense what they're coming for, and that again that intensity of that authentic experience.
Well, we were of the view,
Yeah.
we said, they're our customers. I don't care if they're not arriving on through normal travel with their car. However they're coming, they're welcome in our region, and we're going to make them feel as special as though they arrived in a car.
Yeah.
Well, I think you can read when you get the closer look at the little print that says what are the friction points, but
Looking forward to reading this.
yeah, you can read the small print when you get the pack.
Well, you can actually pull it apart and kind of upload it
You
and
can
take a look at
pull
it.
it out and
Yeah.
stretch it.
So,
Okay.
but definitely that's something. Yeah. So thank you so
you.
much, Tammy, because it was a really great collaborative thing. Because Tammy just has so much knowledge of the what the ships have got, where they can do, what are the logistical problems that I just wouldn't have. I know what customers tell us about cruising. And curiously, I'd actually had the opposite experience. I took a cruise with my family in the UK, multi-generational trip. Cruising is perfect for that. We had a tender port that we didn't go into. That was a safety issue. But I still think it could have been handled better, because it turns out when I was talking to people on a cruise, we actually had people on that cruise, it was their third time they'd taken that cruise to go to that particular port. And apparently it's one of the toughest ports in the world to get a tender into, and the failure rate is about 55%. But I'm sitting there going, well, does that thing communicate? Because for me, everything else about this trip, it was an anniversary trip for my mother, it was her 80th. Everything else about that experience was for someone else. That particular tender port was my bit of the trip. It was World War II Guernsey experience. It's the only part of the British Isles that was occupied during World War II. And I've never been there. I grew up an overnight ferry sailing from there. But I've never been, because you never do when you're local, do you? It's like all the Australians who've never really seen how much we have to offer in Australia. Same. So I'm really excited. I'm finally getting to this place I've read so much about, getting to do this tour of the wartime tunnels, the underground hospitals, all that. My only bit of the trip got taken away. And I'm kind of like, okay, it's a safety issue. But it wasn't only a safety issue. We left our previous port late because no one had actually checked that the entire Belgium was on strike that day. So everyone who'd gotten the train into town got stuck. cruise ships will leave without 2 passengers, but they won't leave without 180. So I'm sitting there going, okay, that was a communication issue, is maybe it's time to think about this, allow more time than usual to get back, be prepared to take a cab and spend 80 euros. But also telling me that that was a tough thing and to expect it really would have factored into that disappointment. So, and again, probably the same for the operators in Guernsey, because 50% of the time they're gearing up to be offering people tours. I had to get my money back. So I think it's really a win-win-win if we, again, it's that it's okay to be honest about what's going on. Yes, you'll lose some people, but you'll win other people, and the people who come will be much more loyal, much more likely to recommend in the end of the day. So I'd really like to thank Tammy for being prepared to kind of share this bit of IP that we've developed between us. Why would we bother doing this? Because it does sound like hard work, doesn't it? A bit. Okay, this is why, and this is some work from Harvard Business Review that McKinsey's did. The difference in terms of what happens to your revenue growth if your customer journey experience is better and delivers a better result for the client. It goes like that. So the more satisfied people are with the entire journey and the entire knowing those. So basically what they did was they looked at 3 journeys and said, let's improve the satisfaction with those 3 customer journeys. That's what happened. Now, these are different sectors from ours, and believe me, if you think we've got problems in tourism, you ever want to listen to someone on the hotline to a pay TV company, or you've had a bad experience with a pay TV company, you'll know how hard that is. So this is about this. It's about taking that revenue growth. It's about the thing we're all trying to do, which is make more money. And you do it both because you keep more customers and because, you know, those old numbers that we've heard for many years, you know, you can magnify the number by 10. It used to be, you know, a happy customer tells 3 people, an unhappy customer tells 10. If an unhappy customer tells 10 people these days, they've probably got 150 friends on Facebook who remember that. So the magnification of both advocacy and disadvocacy is there. And there's been some work done by Ehrenberg Bass Institute down in South Australia where they've talked about the difference between what happens with negative word of mouth and positive word of mouth. Negative word of mouth prevents acquisition. Positive word of mouth drives loyalty. And I think that makes, if you think about it, kind of makes sense, but it's great that they've proved it. So that's why you would bother. So I think doing what we talked about with the map, I tried to find a pretty way to do this, but I think maybe not try and think about the whole journey at once. If you're up for it, do it. And I'd say think of it from the inside, think of it from the outside. So what's it look like from the customer's point of view? Then what do your staff see? You know, what's the most common things you complain about? How many times, Bron, have we done presentations to clients where we've gone that and they go, oh, actually the staff say that a lot. Duh. The staff are telling you what the problem is and you're not listening to them. So pull that through. But I thought, you know, pick one stage of the path to purchase and do it that way as a kind of learning exercise. Can you name 2 potential friction points in one of your customer journeys and think about how you might solve them? And if you've got nothing else out of today, then the things that Bron was talking about your personas and, you know, doing that thinking content. And can I solve 2 friction points at one point in the path to journey? You will see an advantage to your business or organisation in doing that. So that